Hey there, friends. Let's see if we get everything right here. I am here, am I not? And you can see me. Can you hear me as well? Yeah? Sound seems to be working fine. Amazing. So here we are. Um, Getting healthy is simple, but not easy. That's something that we're going to talk about today. And you can see on the background here, beyond the windows, that I am still in the mountains, but it is raining and pouring outside. Um, so I am letting the rain do its thing, and then I'm going to go out and go for my morning training right after we do this recording here. And I just wanted to check in with all of you, having been in the mountains. Let me just get a bit more comfortable here because I'm not at my usual spot there. That's better. In my own kitchen, but I'm actually in the cabin, the kitchen of the holiday cabin, which is quite a nice place to be, actually. And we're going to be here for another 2 weeks. And I have been hiking every day. I have been enjoying clear weather and clear skies and sunshine. I've been enjoying a long walk through a drizzle and a rain yesterday. I had to buy some new gear, but moving we are doing. There has been one exception where I felt a bit under the weather. Maybe I got a bit of a scratchy throat, where we didn't do that much, but for the other 13 days that we've been here, we have been on a roll, and it has been fantastic. Um, it's been fantastic for a couple of reasons. One of the main reasons is that it is very nice to see all of the hard work from the last year and a half actually pay off in terms of health and fitness, in terms of being able to hike up 2 hours on very steep slopes and being able to carry one of my sons in the carrying backpack, or both of them, one in the backpack and one in my arms, which is an additional 35 to 40 kilos up or down a mountain for certain stretches. And just being able to do that is actually a lot of fun. But I get ahead of myself. For those of you who are watching and who don't know, my name is Toby. I am 41 years old and I train to live an active, self-sufficient and adventurous life. I do so by minding my sleep. I try to get between 7 and 9 hours of sleep in a night. I do so by minding what I eat. I try to eat within my energy balance, which is between 2,200 calories on a normal day. And I try to show up and work out 7 days a week. So I do kettlebells 3 times a week. I do mobility 3 times a week. I do interval training once a week. I try to incorporate one longer run once a week. And generally, I go for 30 to 60 minutes walks almost every day. And once a week, there's also a judo class mixed in there. And I'm 41 years old. I'm going to be 42 in half a year. But I think it's important to stay fit and stay healthy for life and for living. Jackson Leite, thanks for dropping by and saying hi. I don't know what that means, but thank you for dropping by and saying hi in chat, and I hope you're doing well where you're at in the world. So like I was saying, I'm 41 years old and I am focused on investing time and energy in staying fit and healthy for life and for living. And we're going to talk a bit about that as a part of this podcast, because I think it's important to share my experience in trying to get fit and healthy in my early 30s, mid 30s, and early 40s. Because we as a society are facing some serious challenges and difficulties in actually working on our health and fitness. But for me, the payoff, especially this holiday hiking in the mountains, has been incredibly clear and obvious. Because I don't think we would be having the amount of activity and fun that we're having um, were I not doing as well in terms of my health and fitness as I am today. And I think it's generally a good idea to understand where we are as a society in terms of our focus on health and focus on fitness, and then to look at what that means for us as men, as fathers, in our early 40s, looking at the life that we have ahead of us and what we actually want to make of that. So, just a couple of things to put top of mind. And by the way, when you drop by, go ahead, hit like, say hi in chat. If you have any questions about getting fit and healthy in your 30s, 40s, or 50s, and you want to hear my experience, go ahead and ask away. I'd be more than happy to answer your questions or have a conversation with you about that topic. But let's look at some of the statistics, some of the things that I base my understanding of why this is such a challenge on, and why I do the things that I do. And mind you, I don't do anything extreme. Like I said at the start, this is not about the way I feel. This is not about the way I look. This is about the way I feel. I want to feel fit, capable, and competent for life and for living the life that I want to provide for myself and want to provide for my family. So let's start with the general composition of society. More than half people, the adults in the country that I'm from, which is the Netherlands, are overweight. Okay, percentage of them are obese or live with obesity, but more than half of the people, of the adults, are overweight. 1. 2, we know that about 1/3 of the kids moves one time or less per week. Okay, moves as in is active. So teenagers and children don't get enough activity in their lives. Or looking at that the other way around 70% of children are growing up not moving sufficiently or not getting sufficient activity throughout the week. And this establishes a pattern for life maybe that is going to be more difficult to break. The third thing that sticks in mind for me is that it is expected in 2030, 2035 that of adults over age 45 in the country that I'm from, 1/3 is going to live with diabetes type 2. Okay? That is a disease that is to a large part preventable, maybe even reversible through lifestyle changes. But 1/3 of people in my age bracket, right, by 2030, that's going to be my age bracket, are going to live with that condition, and that might not be necessary. And that is a precursor to a lot of other negative and adverse health outcomes. There are a lot more statistics about society and societal health that we can look at, but just lifting out those couple, right? We're not moving enough. We are overweight because of reasons that we'll discuss in a moment, and the amount of people that are going to live with a chronic disease that is related to lifestyle, right? Diabetes type 1 is genetic predisposition for that. Diabetes type 2 is very much related to lifestyle, is growing and increasing. Yet we know everything we need to know about staying fit, staying healthy for life, but we're not doing it. So what's going on, right? Why are we here? Why is this the state that we find ourselves in? And this is a problem for a number of reasons, right? But at a very personal level, living with conditions that limit our ability to go out and explore life, our ability to do things and be adventurous in the way that we want to be adventurous, for us to challenge ourselves physically and mentally, and to grow as human beings through life experience, but also to be dependent on medication that is not necessary, or to have our lifespan cut considerably shorter, without increasing the quality of our life in the run-up to that earlier demise, to me seems wasteful of the opportunity that we have, right? Because all of the things that I listed above will generally take away from the increased life expectancy that we are experiencing as people in this world today. It is expected that I might live to be 80, so 70 is definitely within reach. I have 30 more years to go. 80 is a real possibility, which means that I'm at the midway point of my life. 90 might even be an option, depending on how lucky I get in the gene pool and in the ability to maintain the lifestyle that I've developed to stay fit and healthy over time, which means that I have another 50 years to go. That's a lot of time to do a lot of cool things. But I just want us to consider that we have the option of making more of that increased lifespan than we maybe give ourselves credit for. So what's going on? Well, there are a couple of things that are happening that are interfering with our ability to make the most of this increased lifespan. All right. Now, by the way, this doesn't apply to you if you have some sort of genetic predisposition or other challenges with your health that lifestyle cannot fix. And the minimum requirement here is that your financial security and day-to-day stress levels are in such a place that you have the opportunity to focus on health and fitness. What I mean by that is, if you're working 3 jobs to make ends meet, then this is not a narrative that is applicable to you, right? Because you've got survival worries. There's a completely different set of constraints and worries that you're focused on. If there are things happening in life that are demanding you focus on them and bring your focus to solving those issues or coping with that stress, then all of the things that I talk about are relevant in a general and broad sense in terms of health and fitness, but they don't really apply to the situation you find yourself in. So, this is generally here, when we talk about these things, this is something that's applicable when you are in control of your finances and stress levels in your life. You have a reasonable, comfortable standard of living, and there are no real indicators of disease that are beyond the scope of your own influence to deal with. Okay, that's the bandwidth we're at here, and I think it's important to mention that, because otherwise, it's hard to frame the conversation we're having. But we need to talk about sleep, we need to talk about food, we need to talk about movement, we need to talk about connection, and we need to talk about mastery. And those are all relatively simple subjects that we all know and understand are important to our short and long-term health and fitness, but are not necessarily things that we focus on day to day, and that takes away from both our short-term and our long-term health. Now, if you look at the world today, here are a couple of things that are going on. One, there is abundant entertainment available every day. You can stream anything you want. You can flip open your phone, flip out your phone and watch or listen to anything you want. You can go out and drink and party, use other substances maybe. Some people enjoy doing that. That you want any day of the week, anywhere you are, there is always the option for you to trade resting time for entertainment, especially after a long day of work, or on the weekends, after a long week. There is always the option for you to detract from the quality of your sleep and rest for the benefit of some thrills and fun and entertainment. Okay? But one of the key pillars for short and long-term health is sleep. So we have all of this opportunity to trade sleep for other experiences, but we need to be mindful of the fact that we thrive on 7 to 9 hours of sleep every day consistently, of good quality, yeah, and of good quantity. Sleep is what will keep us fit and healthy, and it is one of the quickest and easiest paths to short and long-term health and fitness, yet we don't treat it as such. That's a problem. That's something that we need to remedy, that we need to really think about and consider. I have started to prioritize my sleep about a year and a half, 2 years ago, and the days that I get close to 8 hours of sleep are usually the days that I am best functioning, most fit, most alert, and feel good about life in general, because sleep has this very interesting correlation with both our physical health and our mental health, right? We sleep better, we feel better in our mind, we have a more positive outlook on life, but our body also regenerates and restores itself better. We sleep worse, and what happens is that we tend to feel worse physically because our body doesn't regenerate and restore properly, but our mind also, our brain doesn't regenerate and restore properly, and we start to feel worse and worse, and our outlook on life worsens as well. And hey, if you're watching and dropping by, thanks for dropping by. Hit like, give me a thumbs up, and check out my channel. And maybe you want to subscribe and continue this conversation, or ask me something in chat and I can actually answer your question about my health and fitness journey. All right, so sleep is important. Food is interesting as well. We live in a time where there is an abundance of food. Specifically in my side of the world, I live in Europe, right? I think the same is true in Americas and large parts of the world today. There are places where this is not true, but generally, if you're watching this, probably there is a source of food within 5 minutes of where you are right now. There's either a supermarket or a deli or a restaurant or a gas station that sells any kind of food, usually packaged and heavily produced, but still there is food available. In fact, one of the statistics that struck me that I heard was that in the United States, for example, for every human being, there are 4,000 calories available per day, whereas you only need about 2,000 to actually exist in a day. All right, so think about that. There is an abundance of food, and we don't need to work very hard to get that food, and it is readily available whenever we want it. It doesn't really run out very easily. But we, as human beings, were not conditioned to exist and live in such a world, right? We were designed to maybe hunt, maybe gather. We started farming, 10 or 100,000 years ago, maybe. So keeping foods around, but there was never this huge abundance of foods, and our bodies are better adapted to dealing with scarcity than with abundance. So we have all of this food available. We are intrinsically driven to consume food because we know that that sustains us, keeps us alive, but it's also pleasurable, it can taste good. It's also a social thing, it's something that we do with other people together. And it is important to keep understanding and realizing that the food environment has changed drastically and continues to change drastically. So not only is there a lot of food available, but there's a lot of food available that is high in calories, low in nutrients, and that provides us with a surplus of energy. And coming back to one of my first points, where we live in a society now where more than half of the adults are overweight and carry around excess fat, which leads to all kinds of health problems. It is not very difficult to understand why that happens when you look at the food environment that we live in today. So not only do we need to take charge of our sleep and the quality and quantity of our sleep, but we also need to take charge of our food and the quantity and quality of our food, if possible. But this requires one thing, and that is time. Both taking charge of our sleep and taking charge of our food requires time. And time is something that maybe we don't have, but we can touch upon that in a moment. We don't think we have, because we're trading it for other things. The third pillar here is movement. How much do we actually need to move? We have bicycles, we have cars, we have trains, we have subways, we have airplanes. The amount of movement that we actually need to stay healthy in a day, minimum of 30 minutes a day, going up to a larger amount of time if you really want to work on your general health, fitness, and well-being. I set the bar at least 2 hours of movement throughout the day, 30 minutes of which is specific training, 90 minutes of which is general movement. But I want you to consider what the impact of the current environment we live in is on how we move and how well we move and how often we move and how frequently we move throughout the day. Right now I'm sitting. I woke up, I was sleeping, I did some creative writing for an hour. Now I'm recording this and streaming this. Then I'm going to go out and have a very active day, especially here in the mountains that you can see behind me. It is relatively easy to get between 3 to 5 hours of activity and movement in a day. But in a general day-to-day, that is not so easy. And that is not the case, right? We sleep in a bed, we sit at a breakfast table, we sit for a commute, we sit for our studies or work, we sit in the evening at dinner, we sit in the evening on the couch to be entertained. What we talked about is eating into our sleep. Then we sleep and we start that cycle again. So just think about the movement environment that we have created for ourselves. Everything is convenient. There are escalators. We don't need to walk upstairs or walk uphill. There are elevators, right? There are a lot of conveniences in life that detract from the movement our bodies actually need and crave to activate the systems that keep us healthy and fit for living. Okay, so that's the third one. So we've got an interrupted sleep environment, a food environment where there is an abundance of food that we have a hard time managing well, and then there is an environment that promotes inactivity over activity. A couple of things have been added over time, right? Which is, for example, socializing and relationships, because the people who get oldest, healthiest, happiest are people who have strong networks of relationships in their lives. But over the last years, a lot of real-life relationships have started to be replaced by digital relationships and connections, and it's not the same. There are benefits to having digital connections, especially over distance, but it is absolutely essential for the existence and the experience, the human experience, to have physical in-world relationships, intimately, family, friends, community that we're a part of, for our sense of self-worth, for our sense of understanding and coming to terms with the world, and to help us deal with the hardships that are inherent to life. Hi Energy Ape, thanks for dropping by. It's good to see you here on the stream. I hope you're doing all right, and I appreciate you dropping by and saying hi. And I hope you're doing well. No kettlebells today, just talking. And I'm going to go out and do some sprints and some hit work here in the mountains, which is going to be an interesting experience as well. All right. So building and maintaining those relationships and putting in the time and effort to actually build and maintain those relationships, not only now, but over years and in time. It is important for our health, our mental well-being, our sense of purpose, our sense of belonging, our sense of contribution, and our sense of self-worth. Okay, so it's fourth pillar. The fifth pillar is mastery. Is there something that you can spend time on that you want to learn and get good at, and that you actually want to master? So for me, for example, it's creative writing, it's kettlebell, I do judo. Judo actually hits a number of these markers, right? So it's a social activity, it's sports activity, all right, and it's a community as well, and it is something that I want to master and develop a skill in. So you have a lot of these things taken together in 1 hour a week. But having something that you want to master, that you want to learn, is good for your brain, and it's also good for the development of self-worth and focus, and giving you a pastime, something to do in the physical world. You know, things like drawing or knitting or painting or playing the piano or dancing. Those kinds of things are incredibly useful combinations of mental and physical activity to keep us healthy and fit. And those are 5 pillars, but they rest on the assumption that you have time and energy to invest in them. Benjamin Hollingworth, thanks for dropping by. I hope you're doing well. Good to see you on the stream also. I appreciate you dropping by and saying hi. And like I said, Jack, always be kind and respectful in chat. Let's stay on topic. And if you have any questions about health, fitness, and longevity, more than happy to discuss them. All right? And thanks for dropping by, and I hope you're doing well where you're at in the world. So there's this pillar of time that we need to discuss and talk about. And everything that we want to do, whether that's sleeping better, eating better, moving better, investing in our relationships, investing in a skill or a hobby, is dependent on how much time we're able to carve out for that and how much we prioritize that in favor of other things. Like I said at the start, right, if you're time poor and have a lot on your if you have a lot on your plate, that is not going to be possible, right? So that's why we're talking about where we are in terms of whether we have the time, opportunity, and the financial freedom and the mind space to actually focus on health and fitness in the moment where we are right now. What are we doing with our time? Well, a lot of time actually we're spending on our phones, right? We're spending being distracted or entertained. But I think it's more distraction. I talked about this last week, and I'll keep talking about this again and again because the statistics are quite interesting, right? What is it? An hour or 2 spent on social media every day. Some people up to 14 hours a day, especially young teenagers. Young teenagers are spending so much time on their phone that it is eating into their ability to develop any of these other skills, right? The ability to sleep well. If you're on your phone 14 hours a day and you've got 8 hours of school, that's 22 hours, right? So sleeping for 2 hours a night. If you're spending 2 or 3 hours on your phone on social media, browsing, scrolling, watching, right? When do you have time to buy food and prepare food, right? When do you have time to move well? When do you have time to spend real time face to face with your friend? Um, you wanna look at those kinds of things in terms of where your time is going. And I think today one of the big detriments of where we are spending our time is there's always something to do on our phone. There's always something to organize on our phone. There's always something to book, something to buy, something to review, something to read, something to watch. Yeah, there are a lot of positive net positives about that connection and that technology that's available, but it also detracts a lot from where we could be investing and spending our time, which is focusing on getting better sleep, focusing on buying and preparing better food, focusing on moving more throughout the day, focusing on sitting down for a cup of coffee with a friend without the phones in hand, focusing on learning a new skill or mastering something in the time that we have. If you could take out of the 2 hours that you're spending on that phone 30 to 60 minutes back in the day by putting the phone away, finishing tasks without getting interrupted by the phone, not doom scrolling or mindlessly browsing, but actually spending time activating your brain and not distracting it, you'll see that there is a lot that you can get done and that you can focus on that will set you up for success. And I know this from my experience because I go to bed relatively early, but I've traded in something for that. And it's not time with the family, my family, or the people I love and care about. I go to bed early because I don't watch TVs and series and movies in the evening anymore. I don't scroll and browse in the evenings anymore. I read a book, at least one page before bed, sometimes a chapter, and then I fall asleep. Those 2 hours that I get back in the evening into sleep, I take up in the morning to work out and make streams and recordings like this. All right. So just keep that in mind. And Jack, thanks for subscribing. I appreciate that. I hope that there's something on the channel that's useful for you. Okay. So you take that back, all of those hours and minutes, and you reinvest them somewhere else, and suddenly new opportunities start to open. But it wasn't an easy transition for me, all right? Because I do miss out on things and conversations, maybe at the office about series that people watch. Sometimes I'll get into a series and I'll watch over a weekend or over a couple of weeks, a couple of episodes to catch up on something that people say is really good. But there's also a lot of stuff that I used to spend watching that was not very good and not worth my time, or multi-season series that started but were never completed, that I am not wasting my time on anymore. And the net result is that I can go for 4-hour hikes in the mountain and feel really fit and capable and high on energy when I'm done at the end of the day, rather than worn out and tired, meaning that I can have a great time with the family, doing all of these fun activities throughout the day. So when we talk about, steps to health, these are 5 things that I think we can consider and look into and should actually keep top of mind. There are life situations where, health is not important because we're surviving. There are circumstances that prevent us from reaching the optimum health because we're just dealt a bad hand in the card game of life. But if we have the opportunity and we're interested in actually becoming fitter and healthier for living, and we're in our 40s and we want to get to 70, 80, or 90 in good health and capable and fit and seizing the opportunity that's before us, it's relatively simple, the things that we need to do: sleep better, eat better, move more, connect to others, invest time in something that is mentally, emotionally, and physically rewarding. But it is hard to do given the environment that we live in. So I hope that gave you some sort of perspective on where I am and what I'm focusing on. And maybe there are things in there that are going to help you on the journey that you want to take to better health and fitness. Thanks for going by and watching, friends. Remember that we're good just the way we are. We've got to love ourselves before we can move on. It's the person we are today that's going to get us to where we want to be tomorrow. So a bit of kindness is going to go a long way. There are enough people out there who want to put us down, so here in this community we always lift ourselves and each other up. And the only way to get anything done is by showing up and doing the work. So that said, I'll see you tomorrow for another kettlebell workout. Be well, friends. Take care. Benjamin, I appreciate you dropping by, saying hi. As always, be well today. All right? Take care, friend.